Chapter 6. The Goic Rekakar, Eve of the Showdown. The principal force of the Phantom Flame Fleet was in the process of amassing in the Darmap star system. From here, it was possible to flexibly respond to an enemy incursion into either Miskare or Aptic. Has the main force of the enemy entered Wimber? Said Dusanyu, gazing at the planar space map on the commander's bridge of the top flagship, the Sonkow. Having just awoken, the man was still drowsy. Wimber had been under Star Force's occupation, but owing to the enemy's full-fledged counterattack, they had their forces retreat. As such, the enemy had recaptured the area bloodlessly. And, because they knew it would happen, Command was hardly shocked by the news. That they've come to Wimber means they have their eyes on Aptic. Dusanyu turned to face the Chief of Staff while stifling a yawn. Most likely, said Kanesh. How goes the concentration of ships? At Dusanyu's query, symbols denoting subfleets appeared on the planar space map. Mostly smoothly. Some subfleets are experiencing delays getting there, but nothing too unreasonable. Groups of ships that were taking longer than scheduled were color-coded yellow. And just as she'd told him, there wasn't much yellow to speak of. Then we don't need to change the scheduled assembly time. Dusanyu looked down at the wrist gear on his left wrist. That's 54 hours from now, I see. Yes. Now tell me, what of the enemy's forces? The closer both sides of the war were drawing to each other, the more clearly the other side's scope of power could be ascertained. Consequently, more detailed information must have trickled in while he was asleep. They have roughly 170 subfleets worth, with a margin of error of 15 subfleets worth, Kanesh replied promptly. That's fewer than was estimated, if I recall, he said. The ratio of patrol ships exceeded the values we predicted. That's why. Dusanyu stroked his pointy chin and fixed his eyes on the speculative formation diagram of the enemy fleet. He saw her point. The ratio of patrol ships was far larger than the standard. Perhaps they've learned a thing or two from before. The Imperial Star Forces and the Three Nations Alliance had done battle 3 years prior. The OFF had fulfilled their objective of defending Lokvakar, and so it could be called a Star Forces victory, but in reality it was a draw that resulted in both sides retreating to lick their wounds. Following that, both sides poured their blood, sweat, and souls into reconstructing their respective fleets. And from the looks of things, the enemy may just have prioritized outfitting patrol ships. They may be thinking it more effective to put resources into making patrol ships that would otherwise be going towards scads of assault ships, wondered the Chief of Staff aloud. That is the conclusion they may have drawn, yes. And all the many patrol ship devotees in our own ranks may be right to take heart. And yet, Kanesh paused to think. The technology of war hasn't evolved much over the past 200 years. So it's not as though things have gotten less favorable for assault ships recently. It's also been 200 years since the Empire last battled against a worthy adversary. Before now, the largest real war was the Shishine campaign. Even then, Shishine's heft as a nation was less than a fourth of the Empire's. Moreover, their political power didn't necessarily equate to military power, as they had a fatal weakness somewhere. This war is different, though. We're not fighting a lesser power. Are you saying the enemy learned a lesson from the previous battle that the Star Forces haven't? I can't know for sure, said Dusanyu readily. It's not clear whether the enemy actually drew the correct conclusion after all. But as one might conclude from when we intercepted their reconnaissance in force days ago, it might indeed be cruel of us to have assault ships face off against patrol ships. Against that many patrol ships, assault ships may well be useless. If that's the case, then the forces we've been given become inapplicable. Yes, Dusanyu laughed lightly. But let's save the complaining for after we make it back to the imperial capital Lokvakar. For now, all we can do is try to manage with the forces we have. But it's uncertain whether victory is ours. I've known that from the beginning. We'll be needing Mr. Biboth and his men and women to do their very best. Shall we send ships from Miskare? Advised Kanesh. We have made no call for reinforcements, said Dusanyu, waving his hand no. As such, that won't be necessary. There's no guarantee the enemy won't take us by surprise by invading Miskare instead. And even in the event that the main battlefield is Aptic as predicted, we can't afford to leave Miskare too undefended. And most importantly, it's too dangerous to haphazardly relocate troops at this late hour. I understand all of that, but Kanesh persisted. Dusanyu smirked. I suppose you're less worried about ship relocation and more about leaving things to Commodore Biboth? Allow me to say that while it's true that Clan is prone to becoming wrapped up in eccentric ideas, they are largely sound and reliable on the battlefield. Well, at least Mr. Nelith is. Besides, he has an outstanding chief of staff by his side. That outstanding chief of staff is another Biboth. I see you truly have no faith in the Biboth clan, said Dusanyu, slightly nonplussed. Could it be that some personal experience is what's making you say so? I plead my right to remain silent, said Kanesh. I understand. However, tell me, at least, that it wasn't an experience with one or both of the Biboth twins. I'm telling you I don't wish to answer that question. I see. Dusanyu blinked. Then, which of them was it? The commander-in-chief or the chief of staff? I'm telling you I don't wish to answer. I see. Dusanyu nodded emphatically. Now then, I shall be in the living room. I have much to mull over. If something should happen, please summon me. Your Highness, said Kanesh, her tone exceedingly sharp. What is it you need to mull over? That I will not say. And so Dusanyu savored the taste of victory. There's a shortage of propellant? Asked Nelith. Upon learning that the enemy had advanced to Wimber, a command meeting was being held in the strategy room of the Glagak Rake Poirier Aptisar, Aptic Defensive Fleet flagship, the Skakau. Yes. The sufficiency rate is at 70%, reported the Kaseriak Sober, supply staff officer, given that our fleet must do battle in 3 space. Right. Nelith leaned his upper body against the back of his seat. Unlike with planar space navigation, Dadhoth, 3 space navigation, expended large amounts of propellant. And since water was used the most as propellant, it was water that they lacked. They had a supply chain of water from Aptic 4, but due to issues with carrying capacity, they hadn't stockpiled enough of it. And that was the biggest problem gnawing at the Aptic defensive fleet. It was limiting what they could do strategically, and might even cause their defeat. Nelith gave it some thought, and arrived at a conclusion he thought brilliant. We have more water than we know what to do with. Where? Nifei's gaze was dubious, to say the least. There. Nelith pointed toward Aptic 3, which was being displayed on the walls of the strategy room, with his command baton. Tell me that isn't a planet with great big gobs of the stuff. And we'll pay proper attention to changes in the weather too. Surely they won't mind us pumping out a tad bit of their water. Let's negotiate with the Land World Administration this instant, and we can't, Nifei pointed out quietly. We can't? We can't what? Nelith looked blankly. We can't negotiate with the Land World Administration because the administration of the Aptic star system hasn't surrendered. It hasn't become a Land World Administration yet. It's still technically an enemy planet. Or at least, that's what they're claiming. They haven't surrendered? Nelith stared unblinkingly at the footage of the blue orb. They haven't surrendered. That is correct, said Nifei, and the staff officers nodded in unison. Wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting a commander-in-chief such as yourself to not know that, Nelith. It'd never normally cross your mind, would it? That the Landworld's political situation would have any bearing on our battle? Wait. Then what are we even defending exactly? We're to defend an enemy planet from the enemy. This is why they call you Barmy, Nelith. We're defending the Aptic portal. Isn't that obvious? I suppose so. Unfortunately, his brother's opinion did contain a kernel of truth, and he was forced to admit it. In any case, pumping water out of that land world would be tantamount to pillaging it. To the Ov, anything that was floating in space was theirs, no matter who constructed it. But on the other side of that coin, they recognized land world resources as belonging to land world peoples and cared not for taking them by force. Pillaging, you say? That sounded like sweet music to his ears. How many years has it been since the Star Forces engaged in any pillaging? Do you intend to start pillaging the place, Nelith? Nifei frowned. I do. Don't you think there's artistry to be had there? I don't, Nifei answered instantly. Come on, Nifei. Our propellant shortage is a practical problem, and in order to win, we can't be choosy about our methods. You may be right about that, said the chief of staff, who crossed his arms and sank into deep thought. War is a duel. After all, it is at that, Nelith nodded vigorously. which is why we should be pillaging aplenty. All right, if it's necessary for victory, then let's pillage their water, Nife acceded at last. That moment, somebody coughed. It was the star pilot in charge of resolving technical issues, the Kaseriaksair, engine staff officer. What? Said Nelith, thinking it noisome. How in heavens would we pull it off? Asked the officer. How, you say? The commander-in-chief was at a loss for words. This was a sucker punch. Aptic 3's oceans lie at the bottom of a thick atmosphere and gravity well. Getting water pumped from there would be the height of inefficiency. It'd even be more efficient to have water supplied from our base regions through planar space. But if we do that, we'll be left with a shortage. Nelith fired back. And the same would be true for taking it from that planet. I agree, said the supply staff officer. Off ships weren't made for atmosphere entry, with small-scale traffic ships and airship fleet Lasomiac, amphibious assault ships, as the only real exceptions. Even then, water was bulky and unwieldy to transport, so there was a limit to how much could be carried by a transport ship, and there were no amphibious assault ships on Aptic. If you order me to, we can compare the outcomes of sending for amphibious assault ships and of getting it supplied from home, added the supply officer. That won't be necessary. The gears in Nelitha's head were whirring. Maybe we don't need to dip all the way down to the bottom of the atmosphere. Perhaps we could collect the moisture in the air. We don't have the equipment for that on board, the officer replied. With a little bit of time, I could try making one with the materials we have on hand, but it's doubtful we could wangle it before the battle breaks out, said the engine officer. A bit of time being how much time exactly? Around a year. Okay, fine. We'll make do with what we have, said Nelith, resigning himself to the fact that pillaging was not an option. Meanwhile, Nife bit his lip. This must be one of the reasons why the Star Forces don't typically pillage for resources. It's a crying shame, said Nelith as he stared at the live feed of the blue orb ruefully. To think we aren't able to lay claim to what's right before our eyes. That should hardly be a new experience to you, Nelith, chuckled Nife. You're one to talk, Nife. True. Since one never knows whether you'll try regardless. Now then, let's resume the strategy meeting, the proper strategy meeting. Of course. I won't forget that slight, Nife, he stewed as he sat back down. I will now present my battle strategy. I'm open to hearing your opinions. Then he pulled up the deployment diagram he had made in advance. A hologram of Aptic 3 appeared above the strategy room table. Orbiting the planet was the phosphorescent sphere that was the Aptic portal, which was encased in a spherical shell composed of red points of light. These are mobile space-time mines. We'll be taking some from battle line ships to lay out in advance. Of course, the resupply mines stocked by the supply ships will be taken as well. Then orange points of light began concealing the spherical shell. These are assault ships and defense ships. Even further out, we'll have yellow points of light appeared in scattered spots. While the red and orange lights were so numerous and densely concentrated as to completely hide the portal, the yellow lights, by contrast, were individually discernible and didn't hide the layers of red and orange. These are our patrol ships. This is the distribution planned out by the flagship. The points closest to the planet among the yellow lights flickered. Then, purple lights emerged above the yellow layer, even more sparsely scattered than the patrol ships. These are the battle line ships. This is quite the solid deployment plan for you, said Nelith in astonishment. It might even reach the level of average. Thank you, smiled Nelith. Now I will explain the strategy's sequence of events. 90% of the lights cleared off the diagram. The mine layer was now completely concealed by the assault ship's layer. Aptic portal's surface twinkled in the spaces between the 4 overlapping spherical shells. Then, the red lights got sucked into the portal. Right before the enemy passes through into 3 space, we will send the mines into planar space. Afterward, the outermost layer, the purple dots, broke their spherical formation and began moving toward the opposite side of the planet Aptic. However, they soon stopped in their tracks to return to their previous positions. After they will have managed the flow of the mines, I originally considered having the battle line ships retreat, since they would have already unloaded, but if we're short on propellant, that's a luxury we can't afford. The battle line ships will remain in place, so let's have them play the role of propellant resupply ships. A thin red line extended from the orange and yellow like a thread toward Aptic Portal. Next, it's the patrol ships and assault ships queue. We'll be having them attack the enemy while their vanguards peeking out of the portal. They're to prevent them from entering into a full-scale 3-space invasion. And that is my strategy. I believe it to be the most logical, with the least occurrence of friendly fire. We must hold out for at most 72 hours until the main force arrives. Having finished, Nelith looked around at the officers' faces. Any objections? I don't think so, said Nife. A truly average strategy. It'll probably go well enough. It's an amazing plan, lauded the engine staff officer. So unbibeth. Both twins glared at the engine officer. It was Nife who let the staff officers go. He shifted his gaze to his brother and said, "We'll work out the details. You do us a favor and go do Commander-in-Chief things." Oh, would I be getting in the way? Nelith scowled. Yep, Nife nodded. You've come up with a pretty prudent plan, so we need you to attend to your office work before you dash it all with some cockamamie idea. You've got quite the mouth on you. Nelith glanced at the adjutant waiting by the door. But you have a point. How did I become a commander to begin with? It's positively woeful, he continued, stroking his command baton. You're not suited to be a staff officer, Nelith. Neither are you, Nife. Though we differ in that you're just as unsuited to be a commander as you are to be a staff officer. Nelith stood up before continuing. You're correct. I am fulfilling my duties as a commanding officer. Now, I'll say it once, and I'll say it again. Don't mess up my plan. But Nife wasn't listening. He was already focusing hard on the task of drawing up a rough timetable in order to be able to decide on all of the particulars alongside his subordinates. Subsequently, Nelith left the strategy room with his adjutant, but not without feeling a strange sense of alienation. The 5 ships of Assault Squadron 1058's Assault Unit 1 were now connected by link pipes. There were 6 in a radial pattern, with 1 in excess. The one originally meant for the Luzrucker, which had fallen in the battle. Leifir leapt from the Bosroar's airlock room through a link pipe, flying across its interior thanks to a practiced, elegant motion only a race that lived among the stars could pull off. The wind whooshed past her ears, her bluish-black hair trailing behind. When the section where the link tubes were joined drew near enough, she changed her orientation in midair in a single movement and canceled her speed by putting her hands to the distorted walls. The tube joint section was hexagonal in shape. There, she encountered the captain of the Sidrogr, Deca Commander Baikar. Hey there, Your Highness, he greeted her lightheartedly. Leifir saluted. I am just a Deca Commander. I'd appreciate it if you refrained from addressing me as Fee. Don't sweat that stuff. It's not often gentry like me get to speak on equal terms with Your Highness, you know. Then do as you will. Unlike Gent whenever he was called a Lani Dryor, Leifir never felt uncomfortable hearing herself addressed as Fee. After all, that was what she'd been called since birth. That being said, whenever she was called Fee by colleagues, she got the sense they didn't recognize her as having come into her own as a person. Hate to say it, but we didn't really show you our best back there, huh, said Baikar. You were merely unlucky, she said, figuring that he was referring to that time during the attack on the patrol ship when they space-time fused with a mine and dropped out of their column. And seeing as your ship hasn't been destroyed, there ought to be no one who'd doubt your skills as a soldier. Well, guess I can't argue with that, he replied, scratching his azure head of hair. Though if I get unlucky more than once, then my skills will be in doubt. Just gotta be extra careful next time. I believe we'll be late if we don't make haste, Leifir said, urging him to come with. Then she jumped through the link pipe connecting to the lead assault ship, the Gamrogr. Whoa, Nelly, said Baikar, looking moved. I just got invited by a royal princess of the Empire to accompany her. That won't happen again for as long as I live, I'm sure of it. They arrived at the airlock room of the Gamrogr in no time, with Baikar lagging seconds behind. Leifir wasn't entirely thrilled being next to him, but she couldn't help how it had played out, and so they walked down the Gamrogra's passageway side by side. The time had come for the Assault Unit 1 captain's meeting. Of course, in such a large-scale battle between fleets, there was no need for any in-depth review. They were an assault unit, and units were the lowest-level formations there were in the Star Forces. Moreover, since they'd be waging the upcoming battle in 3 space, there was nothing preventing them from maintaining constant contact with each other even as they engaged in combat. Indeed, this captain's meeting, such as it was largely a formality, a Star Forces convention of sorts. And the so-called lead assault ship was no larger than the others, differing only in that it carried the captain-cum-unit commander hectocommander, as well as a staff officer and an adjutant. Given the ship's ordinary size, there wasn't the space for a dedicated meeting room. Instead, the captains convened in the Star Pilot mess hall. Leifir entered through the mess hall door, only to find the other 2 already there. After a moment's waiting, Ados Raiwa entered with her military-issue one-winged circlet equipped, and her staff officer and adjutant in tow. The captains stood up and saluted. Ados Raiwa saluted back and took a seat. She waited for her subordinates to be seated before speaking. "There won't be any resupply," she said without preamble. "Not that we couldn't see that coming, of course. Looks like we'll have to learn to be happy fighting with the numbers we have." That meant the ship that would be coming to replace the one they lost in the previous engagement wouldn't make it in time for the next one. Holograms of Aptic 3 and the Aptic portal floated above the mess table. "I'll be stationed here." A luminous dot appeared on the side of the Aptic portal opposite the planet. "The mission we've been given is straightforward. Strike down all enemy ships that come in our sights." "That is all." "That's straightforward, all right," spoke Baikar. "But for how long will we have to keep that up? It's not like we can afford to bop enemy ships as they peek out of the portal forever." 72 hours at most," answered Ados Raiwa. "Or so the Glagam Rakepor, Defensive Fleet Command Center, tells me. I can't guarantee you anything, but all we can do for now is believe. And don't ask me any more beyond that. I'm nothing more than an assault unit commander." "I see," he said, saying no more. His expression was less than pleased. "What's the point of asking?" thought Leifir. Even if higher-level command predicted wrong, there was little use griping about it after the fact. "Any other questions?" asked Ados Raiwa, her head slightly to one side. She and Leifir's lines of sight met. Maybe it was just her imagination, but she thought she saw Ados Raiwa's eyes soften. "Very well. Note that if we allow them to exit the portal, we lose. But we should focus all of our efforts on carrying out our respective assignments. There's nothing to be gained by sparing any thought to the zones assigned to other units. And while that's easier on us, it's also worrying in its own way. Some among you will rise in the ranks and command large fleets, but when that happens, I want you to remember this feeling." "How about you, Hectocommander?" Leifir found herself asking. "Do you wish to take command of a large fleet?" "Who, me?" Ados Raiwa's lips curled into a grin. "I'll pass on that, Deca Commander. I have enough obligations as it is with my shabby little domain, so I'm hardly dying to command more and bigger ships on top of that. You could say the difference between nobles and imperials is that I can be selfish in this regard. Oh, and another difference. For imperials, their star fiefs stand as diversions in their eyes, whereas for us nobles, they take over our lives." Were those words aimed specifically at me? Leifir wondered. "Now then, if you would," said Ados Raiwa, signaling to her adjutant. Carefully, the adjutant took a bottle from the decorative shelf installed on the wall. The sweet and sour fragrance of apple cider wafted their way. Pouring her own cup last, Ados Raiwa lifted it up, and the captains did likewise. "I left half of the bottle's contents unpoured," she said, eyes on the bottle atop the table. "Let's drink the other half after the battle. If we 5 don't assemble here again, it won't go empty. Let's toast to the bottle that will be unburdening." Leifir didn't particularly like apple cider, but she drank her portion all at once. "Now, I know you're all busy in one way or another. This ends the ceremony. You're free to go." Alone in the Bosroar's Star Pilot mess hall, Samson was nursing a distilled liquor made from corn. He was all for that rustic flavor. One of the mess hall's walls was showing video of the outside. Countless ships on a starry backdrop. Actually, there was no way to tell whether or not a handful of those stars were actually faraway ships themselves. It was a magnificent vista, but he was already tired of it. "Drinking, I see," he heard Sabash say. "Hello there, Senior Star Pilot," he replied, raising his head and his cup. "Doesn't look like I'll be getting another chance for a while, so here I am, knocking one back while I can. It's a bad habit, said Sabash, who took a seat facing him. Can I have some? You just said it's a bad habit, said Samson, surprised. Yes, what of it? He replied with a puzzled air. I'm fond of bad habits. Oh, I like you, Samson laughed throatily, pouring the senior star pilot a cup. Thanks. Sabash had himself a sip. Is it true that Ovs by birth don't get drunk? We can get tipsy, said Sabash. But no drunken stupors, no. It's in our genes. Though if someone were to inject alcohol directly into one's veins, that would be a different story. Come to think of it, they might die of acute toxicosis before they experience drunkenness. In any case, we can't get blackout drunk imbibing orally. To genetic engineering. Samson raised his cup once again. But if you ask me, that's a curse more than anything else. There must be times when you want to forget it all. During times like that, we ought only to take sleeping pills and doze. How health conscious. We Ovs are a race hail of mind and body. Though it seems like half of humanity doesn't really agree with you there. We can't be meeting everyone's highest expectations all the time. Ovs caring what others expect of them? This is the first I'm hearing of this. Yes. In truth, I haven't heard of such a thing, either, Sabash admitted. But I can't declare that it's never happened. Never mind that, you're oddly argumentative today. You haven't seen me drunk before, senior star pilot. Even though I have a feeling this is not a rare state for you? Usually I'm just drinking. I'm not drunk. I see, said Sabash, in all seriousness. So at the moment, you are drunk. I'm up to my second bottle, said Samson, picking up the bottle with a third of its contents remaining for Sabash to see. Do you always drink that much? No, I treat myself like this once a year. Usually I stop at the tipsy mark. Is today a special day for you? Soon we'll have to deal with enemy ships in 10 times our numbers. I think it'll be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. That is true, Sabash concurred. If it weren't so rare, that lifetime wouldn't be terribly long. You've got that right. Sabash polished off his cup in next to no time, and he pushed it forward for a refill without a hint of reservation. Samson poured him another glass, parting with the booze with some regret. When the battle's over, I'll get you whatever brand you like, Sabash smiled, his expression finally reflecting his mood. Much obliged. And since I've heard you've got money to spare, I won't hold back. I think the rumors of my wealth are exaggerated. But you won't need to hold back. I'm looking forward to it. I'll keep that bottle as a personal treasure. I'll search for a bottle that'll put the fortune you've amassed into decline, senior star pilot. Will you now? He stated with all the leeway in the world, downing the glass as soon as it was poured. I too look forward to that. I've never felt happier pouring somebody else my hard-earned booze, said Samson cheerily, filling both of their cups anew. Not to change the subject, but what do you think of our captain, senior star pilot? What do you mean? Sabash raised an eyebrow. Oops, almost forgot Ovs don't get drunk. It doesn't matter if you're drunk, or if it won't be leaving this room, you won't be getting any secrets leaking out of these lips. Then please keep this a secret, too. I don't feel entirely at ease with a 19-year-old captain at the helm. Is it her age you take issue with? I don't think she's too young to captain an assault ship. After all, what an assault ship captain needs the most is great reflexes. If you ask me, I often think it might be best to leave complicated matters, such as planar space navigation to the staff and recruit children as assault ship captains. Of course, bringing children to war zones isn't exactly the height of sound ethics. Don't get me wrong, I'm not doubting her skills. It's just, I've been working in the Star Forces for nearly 20 years now. And sometimes, I think how the captain was just coming out of her artificial womb around when I entered the military. Sabash seemed dumbfounded. I'm sorry, Lai Wing. I'm afraid I don't understand your dilemma. Ignore me. It's just a drunk man's drivel. He was aware that he was slurring, but he couldn't help it. I do have one concern. I doubt the captain is the right person for the job. Oh. Samson's line of sight lifted away from the table. To be frank, I'm rather disappointed. The Avriels are a clan of many a legend, yet the captain I know is surprisingly calm and gentle. Her? Calm and gentle. Much more so than I was expecting. Maybe she herself feels out of place. She's probably not suited toward a position where she has to take orders from above. She might shine in a role with more discretionary power, or working by herself. Out of place, huh? Now that you mention it, that kid said something along those lines, said Samson, recalling Jint. The young man was also baffled and bemused by his own status as a count. If I can indulge in a little self-reflection, I might have to call what I'm feeling a sense of being out of place too. When I was in NCC, I was surrounded by landworlders of all ages and varieties. But now that I'm on the bridge, I'm surrounded by young offs. You're older than I am, senior star pilot, but you look young as a punk, ahem, forgive my slip of the tongue. Anyway, when the only other landworlder on the bridge comes, not only is he young, but he's a Lonudryor to boot. It's got me out of sorts. Sabash looked on with a strange expression. It was then Samson realized he'd been speaking not in Barnu, but in the language of his home. Sorry. Don't worry, I don't mind. Just don't expect me to have a reply for you. Samson laughed. Right. Not that he could pinpoint what was so funny. Sobash's voice resounded as though in a dream. Lai Wing, if you're going to fall asleep, I suggest you do so in your own quarters. If I bring the cat to the bridge, Mr. Samson's mood turns sour, Jint told Ekriwa, demurring in a roundabout way. Ekriwa was on duty on the bridge, but her mind was on Daiho, as per usual. Jint didn't particularly mind if Daiho became Ekriwa's pet for all intents and purposes, but what he did mind was being at the end of Samson's bellyaching. Why would that anger the inspector supervisor? She asked as she rubbed the cat's throat. Apparently cat fur gets into the precision instruments. That's a superstition, said Ekriwa, shooting that down in 3 words. Human hair is just as bad. That's why all of the machines here have countermeasures implemented. That's what I thought, too, but I think it's a matter of esteem for Samson, speculated Jint. I think he feels the machines he's responsible for are being treated more carelessly than necessary. The supervisor's esteem, and my pleasure, she all but sang. We all know which is more important. Fine, I don't mind, as long as you're the one who'll explain it to him, the reason why we've brought him to the bridge. If he asks, she answered tersely. I'll never get her to promise me more than that. Jint resigned himself. Gotta say, though, you really love cats. I hate cats. What? Why? Jint stared blankly. Back at my place, we have a lot of cats. But I'm the only human my parent raised. So I was bullied. Bullied? By the cats. Who else was there to bully me? Then why so much affection for my cat? Because it's your cat, she said, her head cocked slightly as she gazed at Jint interrogatively. Huh. If I told you that, would that make you happy? I guess, Jint smiled wryly. This must be Ekriwa's sense of humor. At least, assuming that would be the safest course of action. But I don't get why you'd be so interested in me. Because you'll age, she answered, much to his surprise. Say what now? What's it feel like to age? Her eyes, which were typically devoid of emotion, now sparkled with innocent curiosity. What a brutal question, thought Jint. He had a feeling he'd just been presented with an unforeseen facet of the Ovs. But then, on second thought, maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. These entities known as the Ov can be startlingly insensitive from time to time. Couldn't tell you. It'll be a while yet before I've grown old. I see. If Ekriwa was disappointed, he couldn't tell through her expression. Then I'll ask the inspector supervisor. I think you should think twice before asking him. Samson's at that age between young and old, said Jint, feeling duty-bound to keep her from making that mistake. After spending around 3 hours in his personal microgravity garden, Dusanyu showed his face at the bridge, where the command personnel were working as busily as ever. At the center of the bridge stood Chief of Staff Kanesh with her arms folded, watching over her subordinate staff officers. I've given it some thought, he told her. He saw an unveiled wariness creep across her face. It's not about your checkered past with one of the Biboth brothers, if that's what you're worried about. Excellent, that's a relief. But then, what is it about? Why don't we try making Fleet 1 a little denser? Fleet 1? You mean you want to concentrate the patrol ships closer together? That's right, Dusanyu nodded. The man had not spent his time in the microgravity garden idly. He had been gazing at the fleet formation diagram and pondering how many recon subfleets, which were patrol ship corps, could be extracted from each fleet. I believe we can scrape together 12 more subfleets. It would be 13 subfleets at the most. She corrected him instantly. Is there something I missed? Du Sanyu shrugged. That aside, I see you've already looked into it. I wasn't the one who looked into it. It was the officers under me. Yes, of course. And I don't doubt you've already weighed the pros and cons of this formation shakeup. There are too many uncertain factors with regards to the enemy's formations, tactics, etc., for us to weigh the pros and cons with any confidence. To put it simply, there's no way to verify whether concentrating the patrol ships to the extreme is the right move. Then if I were to order you to fortify Fleet 1, you would have no grounds to object. None, sir. She peered right into the Commander-in-Chief's eyes. But if you are going to fortify Fleet 1, I have one piece of advice. Speak it. You ought to substitute that fleet's Commander-in-Chief. Have you some qualms with Ms. Panesh? Du Sanyu always referred to Commander-in-Chief of Fleet 1, Commodore Spore, by her given name. Including all of the ships already under her command, she'd be at the head of 25 subfleets. That's not including the supply subfleet. I have no reservations as to Commodore Spore's competence, but that number of ships is disproportionate to her rank. The formation should go to a Grand Commodore. If you have no reservations as to her competence, then we should keep things as is. Besides, if we substitute that fleet's command center for another, the work will only pile even higher for you and your subordinates. I'm grateful you're thinking of us, but the command center for Fleet 1 is bordering on understaffed as is. I'm sure it'll work out. 12 subfleets is not essentially different from 25. Your Highness, she addressed him formally. What is it? Du Sanyu raised his guard. It was never a good sign when his chief of staff turned unnaturally humble. Going by recent events with both Commodore Biboth and Commodore Spore, does your Highness, by any chance, harbor special sentiments towards Crofasek, founding clan nobility? It was less a friendly query and more a cross-examination. There are things you just don't say, said Du Sanyu, who was beginning to take offense. Even if, hypothetically speaking, I put too much faith in the abilities of founding clan nobles, would I then go on to appoint the head of the Spore clan to such an important post, just out of some kind of affection for the highborn? Kanesh blinked. I suppose that's true. Throughout the history of the Empire, the Avriels and the Spores had never gotten along. It was practically a tradition. Some even believed they engraved a hatred for the rival clan into the genes of their forebears. Have I convinced you that my proclivities are not so degenerate after all? Having Ms. Panesh hold the reins is the most logical approach. That is the sole reason. And I'll bet you that Ms. Panesh herself won't be too pleased by her role. Yes, sir, Kanesh nodded reluctantly. Good, so you understand. Please summon Ms. Panesh. Roger. The flagship of Fleet 1, the Lachka, had already entered the Darmap star system. It was possible to send instant communications via electromagnetic waves. Technically, the transmission wasn't instant, as due to distance there was a 0.1 second lag, but it proved no impediment to a conversation. They were left waiting for around 10 minutes before Spore appeared as a hologram. Her usually braided, blazing blue hair was hanging down. Why hello, Ms. Panesh. Have you changed your hairstyle? Du Sanyu was somewhat taken aback. No, she answered indignantly. I was just about to get some rest, Your Highness. Allow me to apologize, he said, though inwardly he was chuckling. There's no need. A summons from Your Highness is a great joy, no matter the hour, she replied, without even attempting to hide her annoyed expression. So then, how may I be of service? Du Sanyu concisely relayed how he'd be fortifying Fleet 1 and the reasoning behind it. I see. Spore pondered to herself for a moment, a sight he thought uncharacteristic. So there's a possibility that my fleet engages with the patrol ship corps of the enemy head-on. And the enemy will still have the advantage. If the enemy employed the same tactic and concentrated their patrol ships together, it would likely surpass Fleet 1 in scale. And if that came to bear, Du Sanyu wanted Spore's fleet to weather the brunt of the attack. I cannot deny that possibility. And I'd thought the duty of my adorable little warships was to trample the enemy while they were exhausted. Whether that becomes your duty depends on how the enemy comes at us. Opposing patrol ship corps smashing each other to bits seems a mite uncivilized. Depending on the strategy of command, can we avoid such savagery? We will try our hardest. But I am choosing a battle won through savagery over a battle lost fighting elegantly. So you're entrusting me with the most Avriel-suited task. For a brief moment, her eyes wandered, but the next instant, she looked into Du Sanyu's eyes with purpose. Your Highness can be quite nasty. Adieu. She saluted, and her hologram disappeared. Yet another unresolvable problem to add to the list. He turned toward Kanesh, who stood close by. When Ms. Panesh called me nasty, he said, looking up at the Chief of Staff's face. Should I interpret that as a compliment? Don't ask me, she said, squaring up her shoulders. It seemed she was intent on showing a total lack of willingness to get wrapped up in this particular dilemma. Meanwhile, over at the commander's bridge of the flagship of Fleet 1, the patrol ship Lachka, Spore was lightly biting the joints of her pinky with a frown. Whenever I speak to His Highness, I always get out of sorts. Kfadis was there to listen to her whinging. You get out of sorts? Avriels are supposed to be over serious, she grumbled. But that man has no self-awareness. There's no point trying to tease him. Might it be because the imperial family wasn't born solely to be the targets of Spore ridicule? Kfadis suggested reservedly. My Chief of Staff, she said, surprised to her core. It never even crossed my mind it could be otherwise.